are being adopted in Ecuador. It's been now incorporated into the constitution, as well as in Bolivia, part of the government policy to consider not only the impact of government on people but also on nature. So in this case, these concepts need to be formalised and they need to be developed further, but they're plugging a gap, I think, in our thinking, because climate change needs more than a market solution in order to be able to understand why it is that we need to protect the planet, because the market solution tends to individualise, to put it in terms of competing interests and in terms of short-term profit, in which case there will only be long-term economic damage. So it's very important. The world needs these perspectives at the moment, and we're seeing much action.
I believe Keela has a question.
Thank you both very much for a very, very stimulating papers. I was particularly moved by your paper, Kevin, because of my complete lack of knowledge of the South. But I wanted to ask you a question and just make a very small comment to add to your question, your point about toilets, because it's quite important. The one to you, Kevin, is I've heard the story that there was Afghan camel herders that came to Australia during the 19th century when they were going through the deserts, and that they actually married with Aborigines, and you have an Afghan Aboriginal community in Australia. I'd be awfully grateful if you could perhaps throw some light on this, if it's true. And if I could just say one word about the toilets. There is a really serious issue relating to this, which is a fantastic example of the imposition of the modern upon traditional structures, and that is the disastrous introduction of the flush toilet. Because in Yemen now, where Yemen is suffering from a huge water crisis, you take a system where for centuries the whole question of human waste has been brilliantly ecologically dealt with, so that the dry toilets, which take the waste, which properly compost it, and which then goes back into the land, so that you get this whole cycle taking place, that this dry system has been replaced by flush toilets. And this is one of the most devastating examples of the way in which modernity comes in. It appears to be making things better, but is actually creating an environmental catastrophe. I just wanted to add that, because I think the whole issue of human waste is absolutely crucial in terms of... thank you very much.
Ahmad, your paper made me think about the history of Islam in Australia, particularly indigenous Islam, certainly the Afghan camel traders. Australia now has more camels than any country in the world because of the role they play in transport across the desert, and so there are many descendants of these Afghan traders, Afghan cameleers in Australia today. But prior to that, fishermen from Sulawesi, the Macassans, came to trade in Australia before the British, and they brought with them Muslim traditions. So there are some Aboriginal rituals which are about farewelling the Macassan traders, which have the call to prayer and so on in them. But most, I think, importantly, in the freedom struggles in the 70s and 80s, that many Aboriginal people drew from the model of the United States, black liberation struggles, people like Muhammad Ali, and many of them converted to Islam as part of their political struggle, and they continue. And this People's Tribunal I mentioned is being led by one of those Muslim Aboriginal leaders.
We're back on the toilets now. This is an
wonderful what you said. Toilets, it's one of my favorite topics, really. And then it's interesting that you mentioned Yemen, because I've been to Yemen. It's my ancestral home. So in the province of Hadramaut in Yemen,